All right, good afternoon. So if you're gonna hear like music, it's because I'm at the church. So anyway, for this afternoon, we're going to discuss the digestive system, and we are going to start the discussion by talking about the digestive structures. So our digestive tract can also be called the GI tract or the gastrointestinal tract. So please do remember that when you are faced with the word tract, it only means a tube. So basically, the digestive system is similar to a long tube starting from our mouth, no, starting from our mouth, and it proceeds downwards through the esophagus, the stomach, the large intestine, the small intestine rather, the large intestine until it exits through the anus. So the digestive tract is a series of hollow organs through which food passes in order for it to be digested. The order of food passage, so this is the order of organs through which food passes through, no? So it begins with the mouth, followed by the pharynx or the throat, the esophagus or the food tube, the stomach, the small intestine, then the large intestine. Now, ang digestive system natin, it has several functions, and those several functions should have been discussed in the lecture. But basically, when we say digestion, there are three major functions. These are secretion, which is the production of digestive enzymes and juices, which helps break down the food from, let's say, what was your breakfast or your lunch earlier. Maybe you ate like chicken and rice. So that those are the materials that we ate. But during digestion, we actually break down chicken and rice into protein and carbohydrates. And furthermore, they are broken down into glucose and amino acids because those are the building blocks, right? For a while, ha? All right. Aside from secretion, digestion is also a part of the major functions of the digestive system. In digestion, we convert food into analytes. So that is through the help of the digestive enzymes that we have, right? And then lastly, we have absorption, which is the process of moving these analytes from the digestive system towards the blood or towards the circulation. So these analytes are important for growth and vitality. Vitality meaning the sustenance of life. So in our digestive system, aside from the digestive organs, we also have accessory organs. When we say accessory organs, these are organs that may not necessarily have food passing through them, but they do have functions that support digestion. Again, when we say accessory organs, these are organs which do not necessarily have food passing through them, but they do have functions that support digestion. This includes your salivary glands, which secretes amylase, and amylase is very important for carbohydrate digestion. Kindly take note of that. So this tells us, guys, that even in our mouth, no? Food is still in our mouth, but food is already starting to be digested by our saliva through the enzyme called amylase. Galing, no? Sa bibig pa lang, nagsisimula na yung digestion. Accessory organs also include our liver. Why? Because the liver produces bile, and bile is very important for the digestion of fat or lipids. Okay? And then lastly, your gallbladder, which is, it functions as the storage of bile. So the liver kasi will continue to produce bile. But of course, we do not eat 24 hours a day naman, right? So those bile that the liver produces and is not consumed during digestion, we do for what? So as mentioned, no, we do not eat 24 hours a day naman. So what happens to those bile that the liver produces? It's actually stored in our gallbladder. And then when we eat, the gallbladder then functions to secrete yung stored bile produced by the liver. So any questions so far, guys?
None po, sir.
All right, let's continue. So lastly, we have the accessory organ called pancreas. So the pancreas, it functions naman to produce lipase. And lipase is also important because it breaks down fats, just like your bile. Now here is an image showing you the different accessory organs. The liver, here in brown, the gallbladder in green, and then this yellowish structure are your pancreas. Now, all throughout the digestive system, it is composed of 4 layers. So anywhere you go, esophagus man yan, stomach, large intestine, small intestine, they are all made up of the same 4 layers. The innermost layer is called mucosa. Okay? The innermost layer is called mucosa. This is the inner lining, and it is composed of 3 sublayers. Okay? The 3 sublayers are the mucous epithelium, the connective tissue called lamina propria, and the smooth muscle called muscularis mucosae. I think I have that in my next slide, so you don't have to take note of that right now. So ito siya, the innermost layer, the innermost layer, mucosa. So bakit siya tinawag na mucosa? Why is it called mucosa? Because basically the main function of your mucous layer or your mucosa layer is to produce mucus. Why do we need to have a lot of mucus? So that the digestive organs will not digest themselves. Get that? Of course, our digestive organs would secrete very potent acids and enzymes capable of breaking down food. So, 'di ba, when you come to think of it, oo nga, no, how does it happen, or why is it that the digestive system does not or is not able to digest itself, especially in moments of hunger or in fasting, or those people who do not eat for a long time? How come their digestive system are intact? That's because of the presence of that thick mucus layer that protects our digestive organs. The second layer here, labeled as number 2, is your submucosa. Ito siya. And as you can see here, you will find red, blue, and yellow structure. So what are those? Those are your blood vessels and nerves. So the submucosa is a thick layer of connective tissue containing blood vessels, nerves, and even glands. The third layer is your muscularis layer. Ito po siya. And then another layer outside. So the muscularis layer is a thick layer, guys, of muscles. And actually, there are 2 major layers of muscles. The inner layer, as you can see here, it has a circular orientation. Paikot, no? Kaya circular, inner circular. And then the outer one, the orientation is longitudinal. So in order for you to remember, I want you to remember LOCI. LOCI. What does that stand for? Longitudinal outer, circular inner. Okay? Longitudinal outer, circular inner. And then the last layer is your serosa. So the serosa layer is the outermost layer naman. Actually, in some organs, they would call the outermost layer as adventitia. So ano bang difference? What's the difference between serosa and adventitia? So when we say serosa, it is accompanied, or the outer layer is accompanied by peritoneum. So what is the peritoneum? Towards the end of the discussion, I will show you or teach you what the peritoneum is. So please do remember these 4 layers. So again, here is a histologic slide showing you the different layers, and here is everything that I just mentioned earlier. Again, we see here the mucosal layer, the innermost. Let me just, here's the innermost layer, the mucosal layer, composed of 3 sublayers: your mucous epithelium, your lamina propria or the connective tissue, and then a thin smooth muscle layer called muscularis mucosae. And then underneath that is your submucosa. Ito po yung submucosa where you will find this is a blood vessel, no? And your nerves as well. The muscularis layer, kita nyo ba? 2 layers of muscle here. Circular, inner, and then longitudinal sa labas. And then, here is an image showing you your serosa. Again, serosa is the outermost layer together with peritoneum. Okay? Now, it's very important for us to understand also the cells that are present in our digestive system, specifically in the stomach. Why? Because it is in the stomach that we store food, and the major breaking down of food or the major digestion process happens really in the stomach. And it is through the help of these different cells. So first, I want to introduce to you this structure over here, and we call this the gastric pit. So when we say pit, it is a burrow, or in Tagalog, hukay. So it looks like somebody, parang may naghukay dito, no? Ayan, forming this structure. So the upper part is called the gastric pit. Then we have the neck, and then the bottom part, that is where you will find the gastric glands. And all throughout those different parts, you will have different cells with different functions. So the stomach wall, please do remember, is lined by simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium. So all of these are actually simple columnar epithelium. Now, the gastric pits, as mentioned, are the opening of your gastric glands. And in your gastric pits, we find this orange-looking cell called surface mucous cells. So what are these surface mucous cells? They are goblet cells which secrete mucus from the name itself to protect itself from the acid that is present in the stomach. So where are they found? They are found at the surface of the gastric pit. Kaya sila surface and then mucus because that is what they produce. Next, we have mucous neck cells. So these are found at the neck area. But basically, the function is similar to the surface mucous cells. Ang difference lang is the location. Mucous neck cells are found at the neck. But they also produce mucus. Next, this reddish-looking cell, these are very important because they produce hydrochloric acid. HCl is hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. So hydrochloric acid, I'm sure that you've heard of this. This is a very strong acid capable of dissolving the food that we intake, no? Kaya nga, 'di ba, we also have a condition called hyperacidity. So that happens when there is too much hydrochloric acid that is produced by your parietal cells. Now, what is intrinsic factor naman? You know what? Intrinsic factor is also very important, guys, because intrinsic factor helps the body absorb vitamin B12. It helps the body absorb vitamin B12. And in fact, you will learn when you get to your third year, kung magsisipag, mag-aaral mabuti, you will get to third year, you will learn in your parasitology that there is a worm, a parasite, that actually eats intrinsic factor. So once it eats intrinsic factor, the body will not be able to absorb vitamin B12 anymore. And if we have low vitamin B12, it will have an effect on our red blood cell. Okay, it will have an effect on our red blood cell. So, this intrinsic factor produced by your parietal cells is very, very important. Next, we have chief cells. These are the purple-looking cells in this image. They are darker staining cells, and they produce pepsinogen. Pepsinogen. So, palatandaan dyan, P. Why? Because it digests proteins. But before pepsinogen can do that, pepsinogen must first be converted into the active form, which is pepsin. Okay? So chief cells would produce pepsinogen, but Pepsinogen won't be able to digest proteins unless it is activated into pepsin. Now, lastly, we have G cells. These are the greenish cells that you see here. G cells are called as such because they produce G-gastrin. And what does gastrin do? Gastrin triggers hydrochloric acid production in your parietal cells. So, in process, G cells would first have to produce your gastrin. Gastrin will act upon your parietal cells to produce hydrochloric acid. And then, hydrochloric acid will be the one to activate pepsinogen into pepsin. So let me repeat that process ha. G cells must first produce gastrin. And what does gastrin do? It triggers your parietal cells to produce hydrochloric acid. And what does hydrochloric acid do? It activates pepsinogen produced by the chief cells into its active form called pepsin. And when it is converted to pepsin, it will be able to digest proteins. Any questions, guys? Or did we all get the drift? Anybody? Am I still with anyone here?
No questions po.
All right. So if you do not have questions, it will not kill you to answer as well. Okay, sagot kayo. Okay, now let's go to the tract itself. Let's talk about the different organs that are included in our digestive system. It all begins with our upper digestive tract, and it begins with the opening called the oral cavity. So the oral cavity is the beginning of this one-way digestive tract. Okay? So, of course, our oral cavity is opened or welcomed by the lips, the lower lip and the upper lip. Diba? The upper and the lower lip. So the lips are actually made up of a muscle. And this muscle is called the orbicularis oris. So do not worry, I have that in my summary slide later on. It is called orbicularis oris. It's actually a circular muscle surrounding our mouth. Okay? And what it does, it shuts down your mouth or it closes your mouth. Now, our lips, diba, it has its natural color. The color of our lips actually reflect the blood vessels beneath the skin. Kasi yung skin over the lips are very, very thin. That's why we can see color because we can see the blood flowing through these muscles. Next, we have the cheeks of the mouth. These are the muscles on the sides. And it is also made up of a muscle called the buccinator. Later, I will show you that in my summary slide, the buccinator. And in your reviewer, I think I included that the buccinator is important for chewing. It's a chewing muscle. Next muscle we have in our mouth is the tongue. So the tongue is a mass of muscle and it is covered by epithelium which contains taste buds. And you know what taste buds do from elementary science. It helps us determine or sense taste. Now, our tongue can freely move, but it is limited or held in place by the frenulum. So ito siya. If you lift up your tongue and look at the mirror, you will see your frenulums, no? Yan. It is the tissue anchoring the bottom part of the tongue to the floor of the mouth. The roof naman is made up of the hard palate and the soft palate. So why are they called palate? Because they are over the palatine bone. Now, what's the difference between hard and soft? The hard palate is exactly over the bone. Ibig sabihin, pag tinanggal ko tong flesh part, you will see the palatine bone. The soft palate, on the other hand, is called soft because there is no more palatine bone towards the end of the oral cavity. So wala nang buto dyan, kaya soft na siya. And then that extension of the tongue, of the soft palate at the bottom is called the uvula. Tawag sa kanya uvula. Yeah. All right, so let me show you my summary slide. take a screenshot maybe, or you can even go back to this recording if you weren't able to get all the info. Next, let's talk about your teeth because they are also very important in the function of our digestion. So in the adults, we have a total of 32 adult teeth. And these are composed of your central incisors. So central incisors are the Bugs Bunny teeth, no? The central teeth, important for central cutting. We also have the lateral incisors, number 7 and number 10 for lateral cutting. We have the canine, yung pangil, for tearing. That's number 6 and number 11. We have the first and second premolars, no? Each with two cusps or points. So when we say cusps, those are the elevations of the teeth, no? So yung first and second premolar natin, they have two elevations. Okay? And then we have the first to third molars. So premolars only have two cusps, but molars have three cusps. So tatlo na yung angat or three elevations for the molars. Now, let's talk about the parts of our tooth. The superior portion, the one that you see, is called the crown. Okay? The crown. And then, the part that is inside the gums is called the neck. Then the part that is inside the bone, you call that the root. And what do we call those spaces that allow the insertion of your tooth? We call them alveoli. They are the sockets found in your bones called mandible and maxilla. Again, alveoli are the sockets, these spaces at the bottom that allows the entry of your tooth. Pulp is the central space between the tooth. Pulp is very important because it contains your blood vessels and your nerves. So if any cavity would enter the pulp, it will lead to pain and possible infection. Now, the pulp is actually protected by dentin. Ito siya, the brown portion. Dentin is a hard calcified tissue, all right, that protects your pulp cavity. And our crown is composed of enamel. Okay? Enamel is also a hard, non-living mineralized substance that covers the dentin. Okay? So the dentin is a tissue. It is a living substance. No, kaya that's why we need blood vessels here. They actually supply the dentin. While your enamel is a non-living calcified structure. A non-living na yung ating enamel. The gingiva, on the other hand, ito sila, these are the gums that are found in between the tooth. Okay? And then we also have the periodontal membrane or ligaments. These are the membrane or structures that hold the tooth in place. Okay? They are the ones that hold our tooth in place. Next, we have first of our accessory organs, our salivary glands, and we have three of them. So what are salivary glands? They are actually exocrine glands. So kapag exocrine, merong ducts. At saan napupunta yung kanilang produce or yung kanilang mga products? They are emptied directly outside of the body. In this case, they are emptied into the mouth. So saliva is a watery solution that contains digestive enzymes. So can you put it in the chat box? What is that enzyme again found in our mouth that digests carbohydrates? Starts with the letter A. Can you put it in the chat box? There you go. It's amylase. Good job to the 5, 6, 7 people who answered the question. So the three salivary glands that we have are the following. The parotid gland, which is in front of the ears. Okay, the parotid gland is the largest of all the salivary glands. Okay, and what do we call their duct? We call it the parotid duct. Actually, the parotid gland is the one that gets bigger in the case of beke or mumps. O, sino dito nagkaroon na ng beke? Ayan. Ito po yung namaga sa inyo, your parotid gland. Next, we have the submandibular gland. So, mandible kasi is what we call the lower jawbone. Diba? The lower jawbone is called the mandible. So, it's underneath the mandible, thus the name submandibular. And please do remember that the saliva that your submandibular gland produces is mostly serous. What does that mean? It means that the saliva is mostly water. So our submandibular glands produces watery saliva. And lastly, sublingual gland. This is the one underneath your tongue. They are the smallest pair and they produce mucous saliva. They produce mucous saliva. So I'm sure you've probably felt this at least once in your life. Now, once you think of like sour foods or once you eat sour food, you would feel these places in your mouth na parang may kinikilig, di ba? Parang may excitation in those areas. That's because your salivary glands are stimulated. So after the mouth, food will then enter the esophagus. The esophagus is this long tube that we have here. So it is a muscular tube connecting the pharynx or the throat to the stomach. Okay, so this is the one that transports food inside the stomach. So actually, we have gates. No, so think of them as gates. They are muscles that opens and closes to allow the passage of food. So we have one gate on top and another gate at the bottom. So the gates are called the esophageal sphincters. So once we swallow something, before they enter the esophagus, the upper esophageal sphincter must first open. Okay? And before food enters the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter must also open. So, Doc, why do we need those gates? In order to protect our body from ingestion or swallowing of foreign substances, katulad ng coins, food, Crayola, dirt, di ba? Especially in children. So that's the function of those gates or sphincters. Afterwards, food will enter the stomach. And the stomach is the enlarged portion of the digestive tract below the diaphragm. So this muscle is your diaphragm. And this is your stomach underneath it. Now, the opening portion of your stomach is called the cardiac opening. So I'm sure you've heard of the word cardiac, di ba? When we say cardiac, heart. So true enough, yung opening kasi ng stomach, malapit siya sa heart. It's near the heart, so it's called the cardiac opening. And then, this big portion here is the body of the stomach, and it's composed of two curves. This curve on top is the lesser curvature, and this curve at the bottom is the greater curvature. Okay, so the body of the stomach has a lesser curvature and a greater curvature. And then, it also has an opening at the bottom before it goes to the large intestine. And we call that the pyloric region, and the gate is called the pyloric sphincter. So very strict, no, yung digestive system natin. Before food can go to the next level, they must first be allowed by our sphincters to pass through. And then, rugae, do you see these folds inside? No, kita nyo ba yung fold na yan? These folds are actually called rugae. So what are those folds for? They actually allow the stomach to expand during mukbang. O, diba? Pag nagmumukbang or when we eat, our stomach enlarges. Actually, ang capacity ng stomach natin, it can hold up to 2 liters of food or liquids. So you can only take as much as 2 liters. After the stomach, food will now enter the large intestine, the small intestine rather. So this is our stomach, guys. This is the pyloric region. Tapos nandito yung pyloric sphincter. Once food passes through the pyloric sphincter, this part until this part, that is your small intestine. So it is a long, narrow tube. In fact, it is 3 meters in length. So when you expand, pag nilatag niyo yung small intestine nyo, 3 metro ang haba niya. They are long, narrow tubes that folds, no? Kita nyo naman yan, multiple folds to fill a large portion of the abdominal cavity. So, the small intestine is divided into three parts, guys. The duodenum, itong parang letter C na to, this is your duodenum. And then the jejunum is the longest part. Sorry, this is not the longest part. It's about 2.5 meters long. And then another, tama ba ako? Another 3.5 meters. So ang ating small intestine pala is not 3 meters in length, 6 meters in length. Ayan. So 2.5 meters kay jejunum, 3.5 meters kay ileum. Ganun kahaba yan. So let's talk about the duodenum first. It is a C-shaped portion. It is the beginning of the small intestine. It is the shortest and it receives partially digested food. Diba? Kasi it receives food from your stomach. So partially digested food. The jejunum, which is the second longest, is the middle section. And please do remember this, majority of the absorption of food, of nutrients, happen in the jejunum. So what happens, guys, mula oral cavity, esophagus hanggang stomach, there is breaking down of food. But once you get to the small intestine, now you want to absorb the sugars, the amino acids, the lipids, the vitamins, and the nutrients. So it is in the small intestine that this absorption happens. So majority of those absorption happens in the jejunum. Okay? And then the ileum is the longest portion. Dito nangyayari yung absorption of vitamin B12. And what do we call that substance needed for the absorption of vitamin B12 produced in the stomach? Guys, what do we call that? That substance produced in the stomach, specifically by the parietal cells for the absorption of vitamin B12? Intrinsic factor. Okay, thank you to the 4 or 5 people who answered. So what's different about the ileum? The walls of the ileum, they have tiny finger-like projections known as villi. And if you still remember yung microvilli in your cell anatomy, they are important in increasing surface area. Kasi gusto nga natin ma-absorb lahat. Okay? So microvilli increases surface area. And then lastly, we have the ileocecal junction. Ileo, kasi ileum, and then cecal, kasi yung next portion, which is the large intestine, ang tawag sa first portion ng large intestine is cecum. Kaya ileocecal. So dito siya. It is again a gate that allows food to pass from the small intestine to the large intestine. So again, after the small intestine, dadaan ulit siya sa gate called ileocecal junction. Now, let's talk about the liver before going to the large intestine, because the liver is also a gland that produces bile, and its bile is stored in the gallbladder. And where is it secreted? In the duodenum. So let me just show you. Diba ito yung liver, and you see itong mga tubes from the liver, they enter the C-shaped portion of the small intestine called duodenum. Do you see that? Ayan. So, pag sinicrete ngayon dyan, yung bile lalabas dito, no? Bile will enter and bile will start to break down fats. So that fats can be absorbed pagdating ng jejunum. So first, I want to introduce to you the hepatic duct. So we have the left hepatic duct and the right hepatic duct. So what do they do? After the liver produces bile, bile will go or will enter the hepatic ducts. So we have the left and the right. And the left and the right will fuse or combine to become the common hepatic duct. So ito na yung common hepatic duct, guys. Pag nag-join yung left and right, common hepatic duct na siya. Now, the common hepatic duct will combine with the cystic duct. What is the cystic duct? Yun naman yung tube from the gallbladder. So common hepatic duct plus cystic duct equals the common bile duct. Bakit siya common bile duct? Because the bile from the liver will combine with the bile from the gallbladder. kaya sa common bile duct. Yan. And it will enter the duodenum. Again, common left hepatic duct plus right hepatic duct equals common hepatic duct. Common hepatic duct plus cystic duct equals common bile duct. So bile again is important for fat digestion and absorption. How about the pancreas? What do they do naman? So the pancreas function both as an endo and exocrine gland. So the exocrine portion, guys, is the one that is important for digestion because it produces pancreatic juices and ilalabas na yan sa pancreatic duct. So ito yung pancreatic duct natin, itong mahabang-mahabang to. And bago pumasok yung common bile duct sa duodenum, it will join, the pancreatic duct will join with the common bile duct, forming the hepatopancreatic ampulla. This part, itong parang enlargement. Hepatopancreatic ampulla, which is a bulb-like structure that opens into the duodenum to secrete bile and pancreatic juices. Lipase is that enzyme needed for fat digestion produced by your pancreas, and it also produces amylase. So, dalawa na yung amylase natin, in the mouth and in the pancreas. Okay? Now, let's continue with the large intestine. I'm already towards the end of this discussion. The large intestine has three major parts. The cecum, which is the first portion, the colon, which is the long portion, and then lastly, the rectum, which is this final tube. So let's talk about them one by one. Guys, the cecum is the one that is attached to the small intestine. So what does the cecum do? It absorbs water. So alam nyo ba, in the large intestine, isa lang naman, dalawa lang function niya. Number one, to absorb water. Number two, to produce feces or pupu. Okay, kaya nga ang pupu natin is solid because water has been absorbed by your large intestine. So, the cecum absorbs water and salt, and it is in the cecum that you will find your appendix. Ayan, this worm-like blind sac. Next is your colon, which is the longest part, and the colon is divided into four portions. The ascending portion, ascending kasi paakyat siya, and it's called the ascending colon. The transverse colon because it moves sideways. The descending colon because it goes downwards. And the sigmoid colon, which enters the rectum. So those are the four portions: ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid. Then lastly, we have the rectum, which is a straight muscular canal at the end of the sigmoid colon. And of course, the opening or the exit portion is the anal canal. So there are also two muscles that control the exit of pupu. These are your internal sphincter, which is a smooth muscle, meaning we cannot control it. And the one that you can control, diba? If you're going home or at school and you really feel like you wanna pupu, no? It is your external sphincter that you actually use to prevent a miracle from happening. Diba? So the large intestine also has other portions, and we call first the tinea coli. So if you will notice, yung tinea coli is a muscle. Ito siya, oh, that long muscle. No, ayan. So that's your tinea coli. It is a long muscle that follows your large intestine. And if you notice, your large intestine can be para silang arranged into several pockets, para silang longganisa, no? Ayan. So those pockets are called haustra. And our large intestine also has fat hanging beside them, and we call those fat as epiploic appendages. Epiploic appendages. Okay? Lastly, let's talk about the peritoneum. Kasi minention ko kanina si peritoneum. Si peritoneum is a membrane that lines or covers the walls of abdominal cavity. If you still remember yung image ng balloon, Tapos yung kamay, sinuot doon sa balloon, that's a peritoneum. So we have two layers of the peritoneum, the parietal and the visceral. So the parietal peritoneum, guys, is the outer wall of the abdominal cavity. Siya yung outer wall of the abdominal cavity, parietal. And then the visceral peritoneum is that green structure that covers each and every organ. So yan yung visceral peritoneum. So what is the mesentery? Sila yung extensions of the visceral peritoneum. So kita nyo ba to? Ito, no? Ayun, yung mahabang portion. Yan. Tapos ito ulit. Those are your mesentery. Okay? So we actually have two types of mesentery. The lesser omentum, which is this top part. So ano kinoconnect niya? The lesser omentum connects the liver and the lesser curvature of the stomach. So the lesser curvature, di ba, is found on top. So yan. So yung kinoconnect niya. Tapos the greater omentum naman, it connects the greater curvature here at the bottom and the transverse colon. So as you can see, ito siya, bumaba siyang ganyan. Tapos umakyat siya ulit, forming, nag-form siya ng parang pocket, di ba? And this pocket in between is called the omental bursa. So ito is very important because this protects our internal organs. So pag nasaksak ka or nasuntok ka, hindi agad madadamage yung internal organs. So because you have the greater omentum covering your internal organs. So here is another image of your lesser omentum. It connects the lesser curvature to the liver, which is here on top. And then the greater omentum is found here at the bottom. And it connects to the transverse colon. And that's the end of the digestive system. Any questions, class?
None po, sir.
Clear naman po.